we find value in helping our clients cut through that noise and doing what's best for the client. And being their trusted advisor is something that, gets me out of bed every day. It keeps me going. And I know that the work is not done here. Yes, we're on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list, but we haven't served all the clients that I hope to serve. So doing the best for our clients, acting in their best interests, and being the client's trusted advisor is the core principle of our company.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Every business I know is in the business of serving clients. And that business takes employees that understand the nuances of how to be client advisors. So in today's episode, we look at how to get your employees to become client advisors. We look at this through the lens of the founder of Avero Advisors, and his name is AV. There's a full name to this, but he goes by AV, so that's what we'll be calling him today. When you think about your job as a leader, you want to make sure that you are getting your employees to think about how they're serving clients, becoming client advisors. In this episode, we look at the importance of hiring the right people, how to use values across the organization, how to communicate effectively, and really why that's so important. And all of these are very common things, but we also look at what has to change in your leadership style as you grow your company. All of these things packed inside this episode. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that you understand, what I do for a living is not just be a podcast host. I actually am an executive coach. My job is to help my clients grow. And they grow their businesses, they grow as leaders, they grow their team's effectiveness, and everything grows. So if you're interested in what your growth strategies are and what's really getting in the way of your growth, then let's have a conversation. I can't do this for everyone, but I put time on my calendar each week to have one or two conversations with people just like you that want to get much more clear about how they're going to move forward and get more confidence and clarity with their leadership and growth strategies. I've been doing this for 10 years, so if you want to kind of get into the mindset of an executive coach, and this is not about you enrolling into my programs. We are absolutely full, but I want to serve you. I want to make sure that I'm creating the relationships long-term for my business because that's what I'm here to do. So if you want to schedule those calls, just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call today. Inside that call, we will figure out what's going on in the business. We'll identify the blind spots and help you move forward and even put together a plan. Everything is free to you, and there's no obligation to work with me at all. They're not even going to be pitched. I just want to make that clear. And we want to build these relationships, and I want to serve you beyond just you listening to the podcast. So just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now here's the interview with AV. AV, how are you?
Good, Gene. How are you?
Fantastic. We're going to have a great conversation here today, and I'm really excited about the topic. But before we get to there, tell us about your company, Avero Advisors.
So Avero is an IT modernization consulting firm. We're based just outside of Knoxville in Maryville, Tennessee, and we do business all over the country, specifically serving state and local governments that need help modernizing their operations, right? So most governments are, in my experience, 15 to 20 years behind in their technology, and we help them strategize and come up to speed and at least come to the early 2000s through our services.
Well, I know governments are usually slower to react. I worked on a government project in consulting in the state of Georgia for Y2K. You're probably too young for Y2K.
I remember. I remember.
Everybody was updating their systems and
Yep.
sunsetting systems. And so we went in and did an inventory of everything. I know today it's a completely different experience. Technology is very different in cloud and speed and security. When you think about, growing a company to the size you have now, you have about 22 employees, is that right?
That's correct.
When you think about, getting to where you are and creating the kind of success, what are the key principles that you focus on?
So primarily it's doing the best for the client, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to sell products and services to governments that we deal with that haven't been sold to before, or they're so far behind that they can't even leapfrog. So there's a lot of noise in terms of what's being sold to our clients and the volume of how many salespeople are calling on the mayors and city managers to buy the next best thing and to look at their bells and whistles. So we find value in helping our clients cut through through that noise and doing what's best for the client. And being their trusted advisor is something that, gets me out of bed every day. It keeps me going. And I know that the work is not done here. Yes, we're on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list, but we haven't served all the clients that I hope to serve. So doing the best for our clients, acting in their best interests, and being the client's trusted advisor is the core principle of our company here.
Well, I'm going to dive into this because I think one of the big things that we have a challenge for all leaders is how do we get our employees to really serve our clients the way we want them to? And I think that's what you're saying, right? How do we really align together to serve these clients that have trusted you
Right.
with the promises you made through the sales process? So what are the keys to getting your employees to be the trusted advisors?
Great question, Gene. It's a tightrope, right? I started this company from nothing. It was just me. And selling yourself is one thing, and setting the vision and telling your clients what you're going to do for them yourself is one thing. But then growing it and cloning yourself is a really, really challenging process. So I start with hiring the right people, not necessarily the right skill sets, but hiring the right people that fit the culture, that fit my vision, and then training them and teaching them the tool sets and the trade. The common thread in all of this is that the people that come on board to work at Avero, I'm looking for people that care. I'm looking to hire and fire quickly so that we're not wasting time on each other. And I'm really driving home the point there that we don't need to know the ins and outs of an ERP system or a tech stack to do the right thing for the client. It's pretty apparent when the right thing isn't being done by someone.
Well, hiring the right people is a real common thing. And this is something that comes up a lot, but I want to dive into the real aspects of it. It's not just about the skill set, it's about the culture fit and about them
Right.
caring. How do you make sure that happens?
So leading with values is something that we're big on, and we're constantly tweaking our values. We're going to have a leadership retreat here in January that we're really going to hone in on what those values are for us. As we grow, we have to make sure that there's not different versions of who we are, right? We don't always work in the same office post-COVID. We're at client sites, we're working from home. The challenge remains not just for us, but companies like us to make sure that we're all driving in the same direction. The other thing that I tend to do is put a reliance on outcomes and the ownership of outcomes. Yes, I'm the leader of this company, but everyone in their own right is a leader. And when they're out representing Avero or me, they have the license and the breadth of operations to do what I would do or what they think is best for the company and for the client. And then they own the outcomes. So at the outset, that's the training. Here's the parameters, here are the values, go out and do good. These are the outcomes we expect.
You just mentioned two of the most common themes across the entire podcast, which was values is one, and the other one's ownership. Let's separate those a little bit. What will we see inside your organization that might be even a little bit unique or a different perspective of how you use values to ensure that everyone stays aligned?
So communicating of values is critical. And I don't think we've done that really well so far. Of course, fast-growing companies can't necessarily spend all their time doing that. What seems to be esoteric, right? The CEO is the lead sales guy. He's the lead project manager. But we're at the point where I really have a good team and I can separate myself and start thinking about things like values and how to inculcate the sense of ownership into employees that are new or even seasoned. We do a lot of team building. There's a lot of open communication. We do a lot of on-the-spot feedback. I mean, there is a cycle of HR reviews every year, but that's not when people get real feedback. People get feedback when stuff happens. It's real, it's timely, and it's heartfelt. So that what I'm trying to drive home is, again, doing right by the client does right by the company and by themselves. So ownership isn't necessarily just the task. Ownership in terms of client satisfaction, getting follow-on sales for the company comes out of satisfied clients, and that makes our employees grow financially and along in their careers.
Now, just a second. AB just talked about communicating the value. You want to make sure that you're communicating them on a regular basis. You want to fit them into rituals that you have inside your meetings, inside the decision-making process or development of employees. There's many different areas which values can touch, and people just don't think about them. You have them, but are you using them effectively? Are you really operationalizing around the values? Well, I've got a lot of research around this, but one area that I feel it's so easy to incorporate is called the shout out. Inside of a meeting, the first 3 to 4 minutes, all you have to do is lead the way and say, we'd like to recognize someone on our team for this value and name the value. And you can do this yourself. You can recognize someone that you've seen doing, or you can ask for others to say, who has demonstrated this value? Who is living it to the fullest extent? And talk about that for a few minutes. Give them the recognition. Even if they're not in the room, it actually benefits everybody because it lets them know that values are important. The shout out in the meeting can be cascaded down across many teams and be used inside of the first few minutes. And it's a great way to start off recognizing positive thing that's going on in the organization, and the values is just a part of that ritual. So I just want to share that with you as a way to communicate values effectively over time. Back to AV. Well, you jumped into the ownership a little bit in advance. The values thing is such an important piece to this, and usually one of them is something around ownership. I get this concept of ownership of outcomes, but how do you explain it to your employees so that they get it?
It really comes down to clear and constant communication. Especially newer employees that are in a certain role that may not have been in consulting before. Like I've got some employees that are from banking, that are from other parts of the industry that don't necessarily understand what ownership is, right? If you're taking a day off, does that mean your tasks go undone? Does that mean that your function remains undone while you're gone? How much ownership did you take of the time that you were on vacation to make sure that you communicated that somebody else might have taken that up so that the function doesn't get left behind? A lot of it is process driven. Like I said, we're getting better at doing what we're doing now. We've grown more with the same amount of people in the last 2 years, which means that we're doing something right in terms of automation and processes. And that's the key element that I constantly strive to communicate. It's not about you yourself. You're a bigger part of the machine that serves the clients, and it's not going to work if you're not going to communicate and be accountable to not just your position, but everyone around you that leans on you to do your functions.
I want to switch gears a little bit, AV. You talked about the employees and getting them to be the advisors that you want them to be. What has had to change in your style of leadership to create the company you have today?
Gosh, so much. So again, going from leading myself to leading 21 other people, a whole other ball game, right? It's a challenge personally to find another gear in terms of motivation and passing that along to those 21 people. It's gone from hands-on management to constantly and consciously thinking about leadership, two different things. I've had to transition from being a manager, and sometimes I have to fall back on being a manager when, going back to ownership, someone isn't taking ownership. I have to step in and do management stuff. But I strive constantly to become a better leader and a different leader every day as the situation arises. I can tell you, COVID was as challenging to us as everyone else, right? In the beginning, we didn't know anything. We were making spreadsheets on how many people to let go, who do we need, who we can let go, where's cash flow coming from, which client's going to pay or not. And that helped me, as a silver lining, identify another level of leadership that was in me. In Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, talks about level 5 leaders. I aspire to be one of those, right? That isn't just working to fill their pockets or their employees' pockets, isn't just working to do the right things for the clients and make their lives better. But a level 5 leader does things that are beyond that, does things for the environment, for the country, for humankind. Very aspirational things, but things that I've spent the last year and a half thinking about since COVID. And it's a change. Again, the crux of it is the difference between management and leadership is vast, but you can't get to level 5 without going through management and going through all of those other phases.
Now, AV's talking about the difference between hands-on management and leadership. I want to give you a little bit of a framework that I share with my clients. Those that are new to leadership and they're managing employees for the first time, you want to make sure that they have something to go by, a guideline. And I think the 80-20 rule is a really good number to use, because in this case, you want to be using 80% of your time managing the work, which is about the meetings, the status, the next moves, the KPIs, all that stuff. And 20% of the time is on leadership type conversations where they're leading the person. That's the big distinction. Now, as they get a little bit more into this, and maybe they're a director level, you want to spend about 50% of your time managing the work and then 50% of your time leading the person. And then as you get to higher levels in the C-suite, you want to spend a lot more time developing the people around you. So you might spend 20% of your time working and 80% of your time developing those around you. Very effective CEOs have this kind of framework across the organization that'll help you, give some guidelines to how much time you should be spending in these different areas. So if you have any questions about that, make sure you reach out to me. I'd love to help you. Back to AV. You're so right. I think a lot of people confuse that it's the same thing. And it honestly couldn't be more different in most cases, because my perspective is management really is about the work.
Right.
Leadership becomes more about the people. You may have a different way to look at with this, but I try to explain that with my clients is, you've got to, how much time do you spend managing work, which is like deadlines and quality of work, and what's the next steps and strategies we're going to do here. All that's important. But when do you talk about alignment? When do you talk about trust? When do you talk about what ownership is? Those are real leadership conversations. Do you have a similar kind of distinction between the two?
Yes, leadership is, like you said, you used the great word alignment. Where are we going? Are we pointed in the right direction, right? Everything that has to go on in the ship has to keep going on, but if the ship is pointed in the wrong direction, we're not going to get there. So we do a lot of impromptu team building sessions, right? We have Whiskey Wednesdays where I send on our Slack channel bat signal to come and congregate in my office, and we just sit and talk about projects. We just sit and talk about where we're going. What do we want to do next year? How far have we come this year? Those are conversations that don't necessarily happen in a boardroom. We're going to try and have a formal one early next year. But to me, the more valuable ones are the ones that happen impromptu, right? What challenges did you face, Miss Senior PM, on today's client calls? Let's talk about how that fits in our global vision. And it's also nourishing for me, right? Because it's a very lonely job, this job that I have. I can talk to guys like you that get it. And the rest of my time is spent trying to get other people to understand where we're going, why we're doing this, why we do it this way, and how I'm really, really open to new ideas. And to the other part of leadership too is to be approachable. You can't be aloof and out of reach, but there has to be a balance. So the definition of leadership to me is just making sure we're pointing in the right direction, and that we have the sail in our wind in our sails to keep going in that direction.
Well, I love the fact that you talk about being open and being approachable. I think a lot of leaders really confuse the fact that, what they do once they get to where you are. It's not just about, time on the beach and time relaxing. It's really a chance to reflect back and say, who do you want to become in this next version of yourself? And it looks like you're going through those same kind of thinking processes, AV.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say that you think about how you're going to make an impact from here and beyond?
Absolutely. It's like shedding old skin, right? It got us this far. It's not going to get us any further. We can stay here and stagnate, or we can redefine ourselves to become bigger and better, or just better. I don't necessarily care about being bigger. How can we get better at what we do so that we can compete better? The other thing about leadership too, I think there's an interim step between management and leadership in its mentorship. Again, something that's been really, really instrumental in my life is to have had really good mentors that weren't necessarily the best managers, or the best managers that could never become mentors. So there's that level that I think gives me a lot of satisfaction is being a mentor to somebody that is young and green and is going through the same questions that I had 20 years ago, to offer something to him or her, and then to see that person thrive and come out the fiery rings on the other side as a better professional, better person is very satisfying. So I think it's a crucial part of leadership too, is finding that gear where you can really give back to employees that are willing and willing to put in the extra mile just to learn from somebody who's been through that before.
I'm kind of curious, when you say that you've got a team that's growing, you hadn't added more people, you've added more processes and more templates and automation across this company to be able to continue to scale. Where do you take it from here as the company continues to make a better impact with its clients?
So I think more volume. I think we'll see a growth in our sheer numbers starting next year, because the last 2 years have been purely focused on building our brand image and the sales engine and the marketing engine. We've done decently well with that. It's an ongoing process. You're never done with a marketing project, for example. And then my goal next year is to leverage all of that as we look at starting 2022 on a solid footing. I want to give more hell to our competition. We go up against one or two big guys a lot. We beat them sometimes, they beat us a lot. But we're in the ring. So next year is going to be doing more of that and getting more volume in terms of clientele, because we do great work. The clients that do stick with us have nothing but great things to say about us.
Well, I really appreciate you being here, sharing your journey and your wisdom with us on the podcast.
Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it.
Well, AV just talked about the key things to create client advisors that really are the employees putting clients first and taking ownership of their work. Some of the things that stand out to me is their focus on values. A lot of companies think that these are a little bit squishy, the softer aspects of business. I disagree with that. I think that having strong set of values that really are aligned with the people, using them consistently and operationalizing them across them is really a sign of great leadership. The conversation across many, many conversations, stands out. But also communication. You've got to communicate effectively. And in the world I use from a coaching standpoint, you've got to communicate where people can't miss misunderstand you. And so that you're able to have different kind of conversations that allow them to take ownership of their work. All of this culminates into what leadership looks like into the modern world. It's really interesting that the company Avero Advisors is about IT modernization. And I think what we're actually looking at is a modernization of leadership. And that's what he's described to this. So that's my perspective in today's interview. If you want to figure out what your next step as a leader is, I encourage you to go to my website and schedule a call. I want to talk to you about what's really going on. And I do this for the last 10 years. And my audience that's listening this deep in the podcast does want to grow. They're open-minded to really what would be the next move for them as a leader. I want to help you get more clear and really identify what's getting in your own way. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule a call. When you think of leadership and you think of growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.